and show people, look. Now, we as Seventh Adventists for years have done research on Sunday worship.
Yeah.
And how we go back and show people, look. You know, this thing just didn't all of a sudden happen on the church. It's been brought in over hundreds of years, very slowly and subtly, how that Satan has brought the Sunday worship in through the Catholic Church into the Christian church. And that's where we are today. But I find exactly the same thing with celebration. It has come to the Christian church and into the Seventh Adventist church much faster, but in the same way that Satan brought Sunday worship into the Christian church. It's unbelievable. You've gone to Catholic sources and researched and found all this stuff. I mean, this is mind-boggling to our Adventist people, Bob.
John, you know, as you look at what's happened in the 80s now, there is an acceleration that's happened chronologically. By the mid-1980s, there is a steady stream of literature pouring into the hands of charismatics around the world calling for unity, and the Jesuit Cardinal Augustine B. reports favorably on Pentecostalism's fresh infusion of energy into the Vatican effort to achieve unity. John, here we have Confessions in Dialogue. This is a survey of bilateral conversations among world confessional families. We belong to this organization and in the World Council of Churches, as well as Roman Catholicism. Now, in this book, it's very significant and very interesting that in 1972, meetings were held between the Pentecostal Church and the Roman Catholic Church. The dialogue was between the Vatican Secretariat for Promoting Christian Unity and actually had its beginnings in 1969 and 1970. Now, the Vatican joined the World Confessional Families in 68, the same year that we did. 69, they're talking with the Pentecostals.
Are you saying or hinting that there is some type of union that has taken place between the Catholic Church and the Pentecostal Church to use the Pentecostal tongue-speaking charismatic movement, tying it in with Catholicism to bring a one-world church and a unity among all churches?
Let me tell you exactly what they say. The concluding sentence of the account of the 1973 meeting illustrates the amazing change in mutual attitudes that has occurred within the last few decades. Quote, the participants in the dialogue, now this is between Rome and the Pentecostals,
right,
have become increasingly aware of the growing extent and dimension of the Pentecostal churches and the charismatic renewal, and realize that these movements could have profound repercussions on the renewal of the churches and progress towards Christian unity.
You know, it only makes sense that Catholicism and Pentecostalism join hands because they are being both led, have been led from the outset by the same person.
Same spirit.
Same spirit is leading both.
Yes. Spiritualism is very deep in the Roman Catholic Church.
Spiritualism and Catholicism,
That's
and those
right.
two unions coming together. Isn't that exactly what our prophet said would happen?
Exactly. And so here we have from their own lips in the early 70s, late 60s, their plans of working together for the unification of the churches. So the Pentecostal charismatic renewal is the vehicle which Rome is using to bring all the churches back into her fold. That's why we have the Pentecostal dimensions to the celebration movement in our church.
And how are they tying the Eucharist into all this with Pentecostalism?
That's right. The Eucharist is seen as the basis for Christian unity. Okay? So that has to do with the Baptism, Eucharist, and Ministry document. Now, remember that the documents of Vatican II called for unity in the area of the Eucharist. Now the World Council of Churches takes this up, and they put out this document, the most significant document in the 55-year history of the Faith and Order Commission, and we ourselves, in our response to it, call it the most significant document, calling for unity in the area of the Eucharist. Now, right away, the Jesuits got on this, and Karl Rahner, who is probably the top Jesuit of this century, joined up with Heinrich Fries, a Roman Catholic ecumenical theologian, and put out this book in 1983, 1 year after this comes out. 1 year after that, they come out with their strategy for the unification of the churches.
Explain what the role of the Jesuits is in the Seventh Adventist Church, Bob, to those who may not know.
The role of the Jesuits is to undo all that Protestantism has done. Ignatius Loyola came on the scene about the time.
What is that? Explain exactly what what is it?
Ignatius Loyola.
Ignatius Loyola.
That's right. He is the head of the Jesuits, the founder of the Jesuits. In the very century that Luther was promoting the Reformation, the Counter-Reformation was spearheaded by the Jesuit order. Now, that will tie in, and I think we want to look at that just a little bit later, John. That will tie in with the mysticism that is being brought into our churches now, and the actual introduction of the spiritual exercises of the Jesuits. But I'd like to touch that a little later on in more depth.
So you see, not only are we dealing with celebration, we're dealing with neurolinguistic programming.
Right.
So this is all going to tie in. This is exciting to see the research that you've done, Bob, and what
it all ties in with the New Age too. But right now, let's keep on our track of looking at the chronology, okay, John, of this is so significant. Now, I'd like to just hit a point here out of this book, which is most significant. In fact, I came across this book because I was walking through a bookstore and noticed this book promoting unity, Themes in Lutheran Catholic Dialogue. I just opened the book up, and I saw on page 58 here a discussion of Rayner and Fry's book here, Unity of the Churches. And here's their strategy, just the gross strategy, the overview.
And you just happened to find this as you were walking through a bookstore?
Oh, yes. I case the bookstores carefully.
Just stumble upon this stuff.
In contrast to this, the author writes, George Anderson and James Crumley, Rayner, that's the Jesuit, and Fry's attention focuses on the hierarchical, juridical, and institutional. So they are interested in bringing about the unification of the churches, utilizing the hierarchical patterns in the churches and the institutional dimension of it, and the juridical. Unification is seen as proceeding from top to bottom. So you get the top ones first, and it filters down to the lower echelons of the church, from higher levels to lower ones. Perhaps the most vivid indication of this is when they argue that Protestants on the whole are just as passive in their church membership as Catholics, and therefore can be expected to follow their leaders into union with Rome. Now, after reading that statement, I knew I had to get Rayner's book. So I ordered it, and here is what Rayner says about this very subject. What he is discussing is his concern about how will the leaders of the churches have sufficient authority to bring their members back into union with Rome. He spends several pages on this because he is concerned that there might be the possibility that enough vital Protestantism may be residual in these churches that will rise up and oppose the reunion with Rome.
You better believe there is.
But he thinks he's got a solution here, and here's what he says. However, even if one recognizes a significant difference in parish life between Catholic and Protestant congregations with respect to ecclesiastical leadership, the average congregation in the Protestant churches, in fact, usually practices the kind of obedience to their church leaders that is customary in the Roman Catholic Church. I'd like to digress for just a second here, John, and talk about the way the Jesuit strategy functions. They like to infiltrate.
Yes.
They like to change the thinking, the philosophy, the attitudes, the ideology. They like to prepare and take plenty of time making their preparation. And then when the time comes to strike, they strike with lightning speed when they feel that they have gained what they're wanting through the honeycombing of the structure that they're working with.
Yes.
This happened in Eastern Europe. In fact, by the early 1980s, Malachi Martin says that the preponderance of the Eastern Orthodox bishops and Russian Orthodox bishops were prepared to accept the primacy of the Pope. And when they knew their hour of infiltration had reached far enough, then they struck. Bang, 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 and all those nations fall at their feet.